So today's video is going to be about the problem the game has, and those are opinion based. So if you disagree with any of my arguments, I strongly invite you to discuss it in the comments, as long as it stays constructive and mature. Now, before we move on, I would like to clarify that I do not dislike the game. In fact, I love the game and I have high hopes for it. I've now played over 500 hours and I intend to continue playing it. I enjoyed most of my play sessions, and I wouldn't have created YouTube content about the game if I didn't believe in it. But New World does come with some serious flaws, and today I'm making this video to not only give my most honest opinion and release some of the frustration I've built up, but also because I would like to share what I'm missing from the game in the hopes that this somehow helps down the line. I won't be talking about the bugs and duplication glitches or other technical problems the game has seen, since those have been fully covered and named by every other MMORPG YouTuber out there. But I will have a link in my descriptions to a video covering all those issues. The video is made by Strife and he's definitely one of my favorite YouTubers, and if you're in any way into MMORPGs, then I seriously recommend you checking him out. On that note, let's crack into this. Now, before we start shaming the game for its flaws, it's only fair to look at the good things first, because there are definitely many good things about New World, and with all the negativity the game has been receiving, it's easy to forget what the game is good at. First off, the immersion. This game pulls you into its world and immerses you completely. From the excellent sound to the stunning graphics, this game is just stunning in so many ways. The game has a sense of scale that beats most other games out there, and immersion-wise, this game gave me the same feelings I had when I played Skyrim for the first time, so this was definitely a great job. Now to the combat. The combat is very fast and action-packed and will keep you on your toes. Dodging feels like a skillful addition. Managing your stamina, health and mana requires permanent attention, but without completely overwhelming you. All these things combined make combat feel very satisfying and, again, immersive. Now to this slightly more controversial topic, the progression. We all know the painful progression wall that you reach in the endgame grind, but early in the game, progression is made in an extremely addicting way. The urge to stay up just a little longer to reach that next gathering or crafting level. And you feel like none of your time is ever wasted. No matter what you do, you always progress in some way. Even if you're just wandering around the world, you always gather, hunt, skin or loot resources on the way, giving you XP and now and then giving you access to a higher tier resource. Not only does your character get stronger and more efficient, but you as a person feel yourself always progressing too, as you slowly learn how to dodge most enemies and you learn the best loot routes or gather routes and start turning your experience into profits. It is true that this dies out in the late game because of the brainless grind you go through, but at the start this addicting progression got me hooked that I couldn't stop playing. So yeah, New World shines most in the earlier parts of the game. The content feels great, you learn everything by doing it, you have a great sense of overall progression, the game does not feel grindy yet, and if you take your time, the game is actually exceptionally fun. But the more you play, the more you start noticing its flaws, and these flaws start to stack up very quickly. And this is what made 90% of the player base quit.
Déjà vu.
Even with the amazing immersion New World has, after level 30, you start to get déjà vus. And for those who don't know what a déjà vu is the illusion of having previously experienced something that you encounter for the first time. In New World, this is applied by an area feeling extremely familiar even though you are exploring it for the first time. And this is due to areas being copy-pasted one-on-one. Windsward and Morningdale is one of the most common example and is a prime example because this is literally a whole city being copy-pasted with one of the starter cities. I mean, they took Windsward and decided to rotate it by approximately 20 degrees and call it a day.
Wow!
But Windsward and Morningdale isn't the first déjà vu I had. And I'll be sharing now the first time I truly noticed the obvious recycling of areas. So in Windsward, you have this pirate area close by. There's nothing wrong with this area, it looks pretty cool actually. The problem is that this area is reused in multiple other locations, and one of the most noticeable location is Dead Man's Cove. As you can see, these two areas are almost completely identical. And don't get me wrong, I completely understand reusing assets like trees, building and stones. As someone that is interested into programming, I understand the necessity of reusing assets. But copy-pasting entire area layouts makes this way too obvious and ruins the otherwise perfect immersion.
Hello, Advent Skip. There's a drag Skip. The castle Skip. Monster Skip. The sword of Skip. Here's the sword of Skip. Thank you, hero. We truly believe that would...
Sadly, the map is not the only copy-pasted thing in New World. Quests are too. And once you reach level 30, you basically seen all the quest types that you'll be given for the rest of the whole game. And that is where most players quit, or they go into autopilot. They go into autopilot and rush through everything as fast as possible to get through this quest grind loop. And this recycled content trend continues until level 50, where you start to unlock the higher level areas like Eden Grove and Ebenskill, which are the most beautiful ones in my opinion. But by then you're so done with the level grind because of the identical non-rewarding quest lines and the copy-pasted areas that you just keep on rushing, not enjoying the immersive world anymore, just to reach endgame in the hopes that it somehow gets better. But spoiler, it doesn't. And this is a huge design flaw. And I get MMORPGs, the story isn't the main focus, because most players will create their own stories, either by themselves or with their friends, which is far more valuable since that's why most MMO players play MMOs. But for this to happen, you need to set stuff up in your world to trigger those player-made stories and adventures. In New World, there are no random encounters, events or discoveries. The player doesn't get rewarded for exploring or losing themselves in the world. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Imagine you wander through the world and you find this weird looking cave. In this cave, as you wander in, you see an old man. And there's no quest indication, but as you approach this old man, a quest triggers itself. And he gives you a description of a location telling you there's great treasure there. As you try to find that location through the clues the old man gave you, you find the exact spot. And as you unbury the treasure, you get attacked by this huge parrot ghost. You defeat the ghost, and then you open the treasure, and the treasure can be something simple like a ring with some good stats. And as you go back to the old man, he gives you a nice big XP boost. And that's it. That's all it needs. And what will you do from there on out? You'll explore more caves to find more secrets and hidden treasures and hidden quests. And without this element, this particular cave that you bothered exploring would have been completely useless and would have been time lost to you. And this is what New World is, filled with little useless caves. Now, New World definitely has its moments. For example, one of the quests that I loved the most, and that is the closest to what I just described, was the quest in Restless Shore, where you have to go kill Stanley. So you follow the quest marker and you arrive on an island full of brown little rabbits. As you approach them, they run away, except for one. That rabbit is bigger and white, and instead of running away, he runs towards you. Once he is at your feet, you can even interact with him by petting him. And then you notice, to your great horror, his name. He is Stanley. And you have to now decide if you want to kill him to finish the quest or ignore this quest. If you decide to kill him, an angry ghost appears on the island and attacks you. And I just wish there were more quests like this one, because that mini story stuck with me. Okay, time to talk about the PvP. And the PvP is a hard one, because I don't have a perfect solution or an answer to this problem. And I don't feel like I have the knowledge to correctly assess the situation either. But I'm gonna give it a shot anyways. First, let me get one thing straight. I myself am a PvP enthusiast. I do enjoy a good PvE, but I mostly play games for the PvP and to compete with others. So this part of the game is extremely important to me. And I think the combat in New World is fun. It's action-packed, it keeps me on my toes. It feels like it should be amazing. It should have amazing PvP. But yet the PvP feels frustrating, unsatisfying, and straight up messy. And I think there are multiple reasons for this. Number one is badly designed skills. You have this extremely fast-paced combat, but are slowed, staggered, rooted, stunned by almost every skill in the game, which makes combat just a huge mess. This isn't too noticeable in 1 versus 1 and 2 versus 2 fights, but as soon as there's more than 5 people, the battlefield gets extremely messy, taking away any sense of skill or timing, and simply becomes a skill spam fest. Combining this with the immense amount of particle effects covering your whole screen, resulting in this ball of mess that reminds me the fighting scenes in old cartoons. In the end, your acquired skill to properly time dodges, to block, or to counterattack completely get lost because you are either completely blinded, stunned, or in the middle of having a seizure. Another reason why PvP isn't as good as it could or should have been is due to unbalanced classes. Specifically because of the way damage and defense scales. In New World, a heavy armor DPS tank hybrid has more health, more physical and magical defense than a medium armor full damage dealer. Which makes sense. Where it stops making sense is that by having so much more defense, the heavy armor player is capable of dealing more damage to the medium armor player than the medium armor player can deal to him. Don't get me wrong, the medium armor guy still does more damage than the heavy armor guy, but the difference is smaller than the armor difference, meaning that in a 1 versus 1 situation, the heavy armor wins. And this just feels extremely frustrating. It cannot be that 2 hits from a glass cannon build takes 1/4 health away from a tank hybrid, but the tank hybrid has the potential to bring you to 50% HP in 2 hits. This just feels extremely unbalanced and punishing for anyone that plays anything else than heavy armor. Now I know that light armor has found an okayish spot in the game due to its increase in movement capabilities and high damage potential, so it's the prime choice for any ranged player, but medium armor is at this point inferior in every way to heavy armor. Heavy armor is the meta, with light armor being useful and medium armor feeling completely useless, making PvP fights either tank all the damage while 3 healers heal you, or a kill from a distance and start running and dashing as soon as anyone gets closer than 10 meters to your character situation. Now to my third and final argument of what is keeping PvP from reaching its true potential is the lack of ranking and matchmaking. I think most of us can agree that 90% of the Outpost Rush games are a complete one-sided battle, sometimes ending in one of the teams being spawn camped. and it makes it obvious that there's zero matchmaking. In some cases, the enemy team has 10 healers where you only have 2, but the problem doesn't stop there. Because even if the teams were balanced, there's still the problem that a lot of people don't give 2 shits about winning, since the losing team still gets the reward even if a little less. Because of this, Outpost Rush is not a fun PvP game mode, but just a way to get some easy gold and assets. In my opinion, the losing team should get nothing and the winning team should get double, making people actively interested in winning, and this would also prevent the big rise in bots that spam Outpost Rush for easy gold, which seriously is becoming a problem.
It's a lot better than we usually do.
Alright, chums up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy Jenkins!
Oh my god, he just ran in. Save him! Oh geez, stick and clean! Oh Jesus, let's go.
We can't talk about Endgame PvP without also talking about Endgame PvE. And the Endgame PvE in New World is a mess. It's a forceful grind and for the most part feels like it's meant to slow you down as much as possible to keep you in their very lacking endgame content loop. Going as far as putting the most fun part of the endgame content loop being the expeditions or dungeons behind multiple other grinds. First, you have to get your watermark high enough to make these dungeons even worth it, since there's no use for low gear score items even if they come from expeditions. Once your watermark is high enough, you then have to grind up your profession levels and get a huge amount of resources to even craft the key to enter said expeditions. You basically go through a less fun grind to be able to grind the more fun part of the endgame grind. And yes, I am totally aware of the amount of times I say the word grind. The worst part is you can't even pay in-game coins to get these keys from other people because they are bound to you, meaning you can't trade these keys. Now people have found a way around this. You simply pay random players to join their team to participate in their expeditions, and this works well, except that since there's nothing binding the two parties, one side can always rip off the other side. And I simply don't understand why player must go through this trouble and risk instead of just being able to trade these keys through in-game mechanics. Now I understand that MMORPGs are grindy for the most part, but the problem with New World is that the grind doesn't feel like a rewarding system. Due to the watermark or the new gypsum system, you could be dropping the perfect armor or weapon, but if it's not above 580 gear score, you can basically add it to the salvage pile. The game throws huge amount of worthless equipment at you, with a few upping your watermark by a few points. The grind feels exceptionally forceful and does not result in a diversified unique experience, but in a truly endless and brainless grind. Like I said, I understand that grinding is part of an MMORPG, but grind can be enjoyable and refreshing even if it's repetitive. Let's quickly make an endgame PvE concept. Imagine that every week, on top of invasions, the corruption throws a new threat at us warriors of Aeternum. One week it's a dragon invasion where corrupted dragons fly all over Aeternum with players chasing them down. Imagine yourself standing in your city scouting the market, and then you hear a huge roar tearing through the sky. As you look up and you see a huge dragon flying over your head, you instantly grab your equipment and call your friends, and you all rush out of the city into the direction of where that dragon went. You meet up with 100 other players all ready to face off this threat. You fight the beast until it finally falls, and the more damage you dealt, tanked or healed, the better the loot you drop. And this was only the first of many. Soon there will be dragons flying all over the map and every player chasing them down. And every week this changes to, for example, golems arriving through earthquakes, dark mages covering areas in black fogs, or pirates storming the shores from the seas. Every week you're excited for something new, and even if there are only, let's say, 4 scenarios that repeat itself. This is what I imagine Endgame PvE to be. The huge turkey boss and the whole winter event is a step in the right direction, but we're still far off from what I expect of a modern MMORPG.
You may have seen a while back that YouTube announced it was experimenting with making dislike counts private to only the creator of the video.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
And finally, I would like to finish this off by talking about the upsetting decisions of Amazon Game Studio. I'm not gonna pretend to be capable of making better decisions than Amazon Game Studios, but I must admit that the decisions they took don't match up a whole lot with what their player base wants, and sometimes it feels quite contradicting. What do I mean? Well, for example, one of the latest changes is that they buffed most high-level areas to the point where you need a team of at least 7 to 8 people to complete that area. And even then, you might still get wiped if one of the bosses ends up having the slicer perk. Not only that, but also nerfing the elite chest, which was the main way solo players were grinding up their watermark. And the question is, why those changes? Well, these changes were made so that people group up and do these zones as bigger groups with the heavy need of healers and tanks. Well, where's the problem? This sounds like a good change. Well, the problem is that the loot pool gets more diluted the more people are hitting the target NPC, giving better chances to player dealing more damage and punishing the core members of the group, which are the healers and the tanks. Okay, let's recap. They made every elite area harder to force people to group up, but also punish people for grouping up and punish the core members of the group because of their damage-based drop system. This is a decision contradicting itself with the in-game mechanics. This is but one of many examples. Their decisions and updates feel like they're setting you back with every update, with the newest upcoming winter updates even more pushing you into their grind, with the obvious nerf to crafters and people that just prefer buying stuff. You are supposed to grind, and they are very clearly pushing you into it. An MMORPG is about choosing your own path and choosing your own story, but New World is forcing you into their path, punishing you for taking any other approach than their grind, which just feels wrong. I don't wish to sound purely negative, so let me say this. Personally, I think that content-wise, the updates are promising. They're slowly taking the right decisions and are starting to implement most things I was missing. And I feel like given the right time, this game will be closer to what it's supposed to be. But for now, I'm still missing quite a lot of stuff. Dear Amazon Game Studio, let's be honest, you created an amazing world, you hired an extremely competent team making your game an absolute beast from a graphical and mechanical standpoint. But this game was clearly rushed and was not fit to be released. The game was hyped up like crazy through very targeted and precise marketing meant to feed on all the desperate MMORPG fans, adapting and changing the game drastically in the middle of its development cycle to attract a vaster array of consumers, turning the game from a hardcore full loot PvP MMORPG into a more casual, non-punishing game where nothing has consequences, forcing the devs into making compromises like copy-pasting entire area and mobs and putting less focus on the game mechanics like fucking swimming to keep up with the insane schedule and last-minute changes, and then finally releasing a game with missing core features like gear set organizers and a looting system that also scales depending on the amount healed or tanked. Your amazing and immersive world feels soulless, your combat being fast-paced and reactive, but also completely wasted in one of your biggest features being war and outpost rush, all this due to badly designed skills. Your story being so underwhelming that it's completely ignored to the point where 90% of your players don't even know or understand the story of the world they are playing in. And your progression going from feeling extremely satisfying to overwhelmingly grindy. There is no build up, the grind feels like it popped out of nowhere, and that leaves such a bitter aftertaste. Everything felt like a satisfying progression, and then you just get slapped with an immense difficulty. This is a principle that is found throughout the whole game. The game gives you a cookie, and after you ate half of the cookie, it punches you in the face. And this is clearly reflected in the player base too. Most people give up after level 30 and leave the game to never come back. Most players give up leveling their professions once they reach a level in between 100 and 150. The difficulty should be linear and progressive, and if you ask me, this is a sad attempt to stretch the game so that people don't notice the lack of content, another cheap illusion that sadly isn't fooling most. And all this because you decided to prioritize your money and time on marketing instead of the arts and crafts of a video game. In all honesty, I like the more unique approach you took to marketing the game. But if I had to choose, I would have preferred skipping out on your plastic tree in Berlin museum and could have waited another year if it meant that the game would have been more polished and more thought through. New World is a game that is at best in a beta state, and even with its amazing dev team, has a long way to go before it feels like a complete game. This does not mean that it's a bad game. New World is a great game, and you are still most definitely are getting your money worth. The latest and upcoming updates look very promising. I have high hopes for the future of New World, but New World isn't as great as it could have been due to its rocky start, and I doubt it will ever reach the potential it once had. It's not the end, but the damage is done. And on that note, wherever you are, I wish you all an amazing day, a Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year.